Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'm back with round 3 of a Modern League, currently at 2-0 after defeating Sultai Ninjas and Hogak Vine. I won the die roll for the 3rd time. Excellent. Go ahead and close the graveyard for now. And I don't know what you guys think about this hand, but it's definitely a ship for me. Mutavaults are creatures, but they're also lands, and they don't help us cast a lot of things. So yeah, pretty easy ship for me. This, on the other hand, is a really excellent hand. So rewarded for mulliganing, and we also get a scry. They mulligan to 6, and Lord straight to the top. That's pretty fantastic. And yeah, we'll go Island AEther Vial. So feeling pretty good about this game here. Opponent opened with Overgrown Tomb. Thought I was going to get Thoughtseize, but then we see a Noble Hierarch. So typically against Hierarch decks, I like to run out Trickster in their upkeep to take them off of potentially playing a 3-drop on their 2nd turn. So we're going to do that here. And the opponent had no response, so they do have a Windswept Heath to play. And okay, so opponent's on Devoted Druid. So unfortunately, that use of Trickster there was not as optimal as it could have been. In hindsight, knowing now that this deck is becoming increasingly popular with the addition of Eladamri's Call, I probably would have held Trickster up until Devoted Druid was on the board. It could potentially get us another turn if they do play Vizier or, cast some spell that has a chance at getting the combo online. Trickster can buy us more time. So if I see the same opening in the future, like Overgrown Tomb into Noble Hierarch, I'd probably just hold up Trickster and instead play probably a Silvergill Adept. Spreading Seas is also okay since we have AEther Vial. Spreading Seas would establish Island Walk for later in the game. With AEther Vial out, it's never really bad play to get Spreading Seas out on the battlefield. So I know what I'm playing against here, and I know I need to draw something good. So I just Vial in Silvergill Adept, and I guess I'm just gonna try to clock them. So taking down to 14. Next turn, I could untap and easily get in for 9 with Island Walk. If I draw another Lord, it would be lethal. So giving ourselves a chance. It is only turn 3 here. But of course, the opponent has all the pieces in hand after mulliganing. And let's see, they make a ton of mana. And I believe they even had the Walking Ballista in hand, like they didn't have to play Tireless Tracker and dig for it. They just had it in hand. So I just wanted to see the actual Ballista, like that they weren't faking me out. So they start paying for it, which is a good indication that they actually have it in hand to pay for. There it is, and at that point I scooped. So a little bit sad because next turn we had 7 draws to win. Basically would have been 4, 4, 4, and 3 for 15 damage. Although, no, to be fair, I needed to establish Island Walk, so I guess it would have needed to be a land into Spreading Seas into a Lord. So our chances were pretty narrow there of winning, although if they didn't have this Ballista here, if my creatures were 3/3s, they would have had to make some unfortunate, unprofitable blocks, probably losing a Vizier. Or at least, I guess they could have chumped with a Hierarch and still had their combo online. So, I don't know. Anyhow, they get there on turn 3 fairly often. We don't, and I lost that one. So let's go ahead and see if things went a little bit better in game 2. Hey guys, back for game 2 of round 3 against Devoted Company. Let's have a look at the opening hand, and I can show you guys the sideboarding strategy. So this is quite nice. The fact that we have AEther Vial makes having Mutavault here acceptable, actually positive, because it can attack. And the Master of the Pearl Trident can get onto the battlefield through AEther Vial. These Phyrexian Revokers obviously can be cast with Mutavault. This is one of the decks that, or one of the matchups that Phyrexian Revoker really can help, turning off the combo if they don't have removal. So easy keep for me. I mentioned I want to show you guys the sideboard. I took out 2 Master of Waves. This can be a go wide deck when they don't get their plan A of the combo. They can just play out a whole bunch of creatures, in which case Master of Waves just wins that battle. But we have to open up spots to just interact as much as possible. So trimmed 2 Master of Waves. Also, we don't want this guy in our opening hand. A little bit clunky in the early game. Benthic Biomancers come out. They also came out in some other matchups that you've already seen. I think it was against Hogak Vine. For the same reason, we're going to need to use all of our mana all the time to interact with the opponent. And since Ben's looting ability is not going to get used, this is just, kind of a weak card. Looks like I trimmed 1 Force of Negation. Not sure if that's correct. They do have some powerful non-creature spells, but the deck is sort of packed with creatures. So I think that was the rationale for trimming back on 1 Force. I do bring in my Deprives, so I do have a bunch of counter magic, but Force of Negation is just not super amazing if all they're doing is casting creatures. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Took out both Thassas because, again, I'm just using my mana. I'm not going to have mana up to pay to make my creatures unblockable. Counter argument for not taking Thassa out would be that the Devoted Company deck doesn't have a lot of removal, so I'm going to always have Devotion for Thassa. Problem again is just I don't have mana to take full use of her abilities. So let's see, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards out. And I believe I brought in 4 Phyrexian Revokers, 3 Deprives, and then it would have been 2 Echoing Truths and 2 Dismembers, actually. So one more time, that's 4 Revokers, 3 Deprives, and then 2 Echoing Truths and 2 Dismembers for 11. I forgot the 2 relics that I took out of the main deck. So 11 cards in, 11 cards out. I made a pretty dumb mistake this game by not bringing in Grafdigger's Cages. The Devoted Company lists are being tweaked right now with the addition of new cards into the format. So I'm not sure that they're all running Chord of Calling or Collected Company, but they are definitely running. They're running this Finale of Devastation card, and until I see otherwise, I'm assuming that this deck is playing Collected Company and Chord of Calling, against which Grafdigger's Cage is quite strong. So if I had thought about it more, I would have brought Grafdigger's Cage in. When I glanced at it during sideboarding, I thought, oh, that's Graveyard Hate. Let's not think about it. But I've definitely used Grafdigger's Cage in the past against this deck to good effect. So you can see I have 3 nice pieces of sideboard 8. And I kept. So let's open up with Oboro into AEther Vial. Okay, opponent opens with a Bird of Paradise, which I could dismember, but this deck always has better targets than the birds. Spreading Seas seems pretty decent here. They're not going to be able to combo off next turn, so I can kind of take this turn off just to draw cards. Another Spreading Seas, potentially also decent. Let's see what they have. Devoted Druid and no second land, so interesting. AEther Vial is going to go up to 2, and let's see here. Okay, so I chose to bounce the Oboro here with Mutavault and then replay it for 2 blue mana. It's not something that comes up all the time, but Oboro's bounce ability lets you filter Mutavault mana on turn 2. Sorry, on turn 3 if you don't have another blue source to play. And then before the opponent has any chance at all to use mana from Devoted Druid, I'm going to get this Phyrexian Revoker out on the battlefield. They do find that second land in a very timely way, and they path Phyrexian Revoker. So let's go ahead and get that second blue source. Opponent taps and untaps the Devoted Druid, and there's a Collected Company, so that's something that Grafdigger's Cage would have helped a lot against. And Plague Engineer, wow. All 3 of these leagues, we're seeing big contributions from Modern Horizons cards. So this is a throwback to Engineered Plague, which was an enchantment that you named a creature type, And all of those creatures get -1/-1 as long as this thing is on the board. So they're going to gain some life from Kitchen Finks. And you can see that the Lord became a 1/1. Now, when you play in the future, now that Modern Horizons has been printed, in the future, when you play against any of these kind of toolboxy decks, especially ones with access to black, or maybe only ones with access to black, not sure, you want to be careful with your sequencing because if you play out like a Master of Waves and some Silvergills, they're just going to die immediately to Plague Engineer. So it was actually a great idea to run out the Lord ahead of time. So if you have a choice, you should definitely put your Lords onto the table first. I'm going to go with the 2 to 4 trick here with AEther Vial, get the next Revoker onto the battlefield, once again naming Devoted Druid, since that's such a powerful combo piece. And then I'll take the AEther Vial up to 3, hoping to get Master of Waves onto the battlefield next turn. So I drew a Force of Negation for the turn, and we've got this Dismember available. So we're sitting kind of pretty this game. We've got the Devoted Druid handled in 2 different ways. Dismember if they have an answer for the Revoker. And yeah, things are looking pretty good here. Drew a Trickster off of the second Spreading Seas. With the Druid being named by Phyrexian Revoker, we can see they only have access to the Birds of Paradise for green mana. So when he started tapping Devoted Druid, I wasn't quite sure what was happening since he was named by Phyrexian Revoker, but it became clear pretty quickly that they were trying to cast Chord of Calling. And the fact that they did it for 3 made me think that they were going to go get another Plague Engineer, probably to name Horror, but possibly to name Merfolk. During the game, I was thinking Merfolk because once they get 2 Plague Engineers naming Merfolk, I can't play any more Merfolk, which means I basically can't win the game. So odds are they probably would have went for Merfolk here, but another choice obviously would have been Horror to get rid of the Phyrexian Revoker and turn Devoted Druid back online. Either way, this was definitely not going to resolve. Force of Negation pitched the Trickster, and I think for the 3rd match in a row, Force of Negation just coming up huge. So opponent main phasing that Chord of Calling, which allowed me to cast Force of Negation for its alternate casting cost. If they had passed to my turn and corded on my end step, if I had tapped my mana down, I would not have been able to cast Force of Negation. So it's possible that the opponent is not accustomed to playing against Force of Negation, and they would have done it differently if, once they've learned a little bit more. But I was happy for it to go the way that it did. And these Spreading Seas are providing plenty of devotion for Master of Waves. So we can just activate Mutavault, swing here for... now this would be a bigger attack, but note the Plague Engineer is out on the board. So it would have been for 3, 2, and 2 for 7, but instead it was just for 2, 2, and 1 for 5. Opponent finds a forest, and... we see them go for Collected Company. Now, the biggest threat on the board right now is Plague Engineer, because, again, he can name Merfolk and make it virtually impossible for us to win the game, since the Lords will just die as soon as they hit the table, getting -2, -2. So in response, I absolutely found it necessary, just straight up, the only play, to dismember the first Plague Engineer. That resolved, and let's see what the opponent found from their Collected Company. This is another Collected Company, and we saw a Chord, so I should definitely have brought Grafdigger's Cage in. It was a straight-up mistake to leave it out. They did find another Plague Engineer. This time, since he can't kill my Merfolk, he just went with Horror. We see that with Collected Company still on the stack. The Phyrexian Revoker is a 1/0. That guy is doomed for the graveyard. And let's see if the opponent wants to swing in. Gets in with Kitchen Finks with Exalted for 4, I go down to 12. So things look pretty level, but they're actually not, since I get to AEther Vial in Master of Waves. Now, the opponent may have thought, when naming a creature type with Plague Engineer, that they should have gone for Elemental, since an AEther Vial in Master of Waves is one of the few ways that they could just lose immediately. But it seemed they probably have like a Vizier in hand and wanted to get their Devoted Druid online for the combo. Combo is definitely by far the strongest plan that this deck has. Imagine the deck without Devoted Druid. It's just a bunch of Kitchen Finks and Monodorks. So note that the Plague Engineer naming Merfolk is now gone. So we've got a lot more power on the board. And it doesn't really matter what we draw for the turn. It's pretty much GG. Just swing with everybody. And that's enough, right? So managed to take game 2 against Devoted Company. They had some good stuff between the Plague Engineers and the Cocos, but we were able to answer it effectively with Force of Negation and these beautiful Phyrexian Revokers, doing a great job. So let's go ahead and see how game 3 went. Hey guys, back for game 3. The opponent's going to be on the play here, so let's check out the opening hands. No mulligans. Okay, and yeah, we don't have to mulligan this. The opponent kept as well. Against combo decks, it's always a little scary when they keep 7, but we've got some nice interaction, so fingers crossed. We want to draw some lands here, I guess. No bird. Actually, we wanted to draw AEther Vial, and the deck gave it to us. That was really, really a sick top deck, because that's going to let us get our creatures into play while using all of this wonderful interaction with our mana. Okay, so they go and fetch a Temple Garden, and I expect them to have the Devoted Druid, and they do. So I've got options here. I could leave up Deprive if they go for like Vizier of Remedies, or I could just run out Revoker now. I could Echoing Truth in response to them playing something. I think I just decided to go with the Revoker. Reason being that if they have the path, say they have another white source and Vizier, right? Then they get rid of the Revoker, they play the Vizier, and they're off to the races. Fortunately, I have Force of Negation in hand, which lets me play my hate card and hold up protection against removal, like Path. So the opponent could have a Plague Engineer, but if they're going to name Horror, then it's super narrow, and that's sort of an exchange that I'd be happy to make. Okay, they follow up with Birds of Paradise. Currently unable to use the Devoted Druid for mana. And here's a Vizier, so did a great job turning off their combo on our turn 2. And yeah, go ahead to our upkeep, take AEther Vial up to 2. And Trickster is even more interaction here, so got a lot of choices. We do not want to attack for the time being with Phyrexian Revoker, because odds are they'd be happy to trade a Vizier for the Phyrexian Revoker, since they have a lot of ways in their deck to go and get another Vizier. Whereas I don't have any ways to go and dig for Phyrexian Revoker, I just have to top deck that thing. So I think I just decided to pass through and leave up Deprive and Force of Negation and Trickster. You can see the way that the Merfolk deck in Modern is evolving. We have so much instant speed interaction between Trickster getting cast and AEther Vialing in, Silvergill to draw cards and pitch to Force of Negation, or just casting Deprive. Anyhow, opponent played an Overgrown Tomb going down to 17. And it looks like we're going to see a Collected Company here, or maybe a Court of Calling. Oh, they went for Murderous Redcap. I wonder if there's been a reason to return to this card, but this was around back from the old Birthing Pod days that also just combos off with Vizier of Remedies, saying that it can't get -1/-1 counters. So this guy would kill Phyrexian Revoker when it enters the battlefield, since it does damage equal to its power to any target. Definitely going to deprive this guy. So Deprive proving its value here, since we don't really have other ways to just straight up counter creatures. I think in this league so far, we've seen every single sideboard card contribute. We've seen Echoing Truth against the Ninjas. We've seen Dismember hitting the Plague Engineer in the very last game. Echoing Truth, Dismember, Deprive is doing work here. Clearly, the Phyrexian Revokers are doing a great job. And then Relic and Cage against Hogak Vine. So opponent's probably getting pretty frustrated since I'm countering all of their payoff cards, either with Phyrexian Revoker or with Deprive. They don't attack. I'm going to go ahead and vial in, of course, Silvergill Adept to draw a card. That Phyrexian Revoker is a welcome sight because if they remove this one, I get to just redeploy this guy with AEther Vial, and things are starting to look good. We do need to eventually get a nice army amassed, but that's kind of what Merfolk does. We're going to draw creatures. And Waterlogged Grove might help us do that, actually, since it cycles. So I'm going to get in with Silvergill Adept here. This is a trade that they're not likely going to make with the Vizier. The opponent's down to 1 card. After their draw step, they have 2. We see another Bird of Paradise, and we're doing a good job keeping them off of their combo. They get in with Bird with Exalted. Again, probably feeling pretty frustrated, and they're probably going to feel slightly more frustrated when I flash in this Trickster to eat this Bird of Paradise here. Again, I feel fine using my mana to flash in Trickster here, because if the opponent has some magical way to sort of deal with the Revoker and start going off, I can always have Vial to throw in another Revoker. I also have Force of Negation to counter anything that they want to do. So let's go ahead and eat that Bird of Paradise. That was pretty fun. Opponent's, sticking it out. So throw a Lord down. Army's getting bigger. Still have AEther Vial on 2 to replay a Phyrexian Revoker. And Spreading Seas is timely because, we're going to want to get in with Island Walk. So, I guess what I chose to do there was leave up hard cast Force of Negation, since obviously I can't pitch it on my turn. So getting in for this attack, if the opponent does trade with the Vizier, they're going to take some damage. We're going to vial in another Phyrexian Revoker. They're going to be down a combo piece, and I've still got so much interaction in hand. So it looks like we didn't really even need Island Walk in the spot. The opponent chose not to block, go down to 5, and they're probably just top decking here, and they scooped. So we lost game 1, even though it was like potentially 1 turn away from like a lethal alpha strike on our turn. And then just won games 2 and 3 on the back of our extremely powerful sideboard cards. Phyrexian Revoker was the MVP here, but Force of Negation also did a lot of work. And also that Deprive on Murderous Redcap, because Redcap, if it dies, could come back and kill like another Revoker. So the fact that we were able to counter that thing just prevents them from getting any value at all. So at that point, I was sitting 3-0, having beaten Sultai Ninjas in round 1, Hogvine in round 2, and now Devoted Company, definitely the most difficult of the 3 matchups. But yeah, some of these great sideboard cards and new cards from Modern Horizons, let us compete with them. So please subscribe, please leave your thoughts down below in the comments section, and check out my Patreon page if you have a second. And tune in for the next video where I'll be back with round 4 of this Modern League. I'll see you guys there. Bye.